Hi, everybody. Very happy to introduce Fiona Erskine, who's joining us tonight for an author chat. Do you want to start us off with an introduction to you and your books?
I shall try my best. So, my name is Fiona Erskine. I'm an engineer by day and a writer by night. I started writing after my children persuaded me to go skiing, and I wasn't very good at skiing, so I broke my leg and ruptured my tendons on day 2. But it started me writing about a character called Jack Silver who's really, really good at skiing. And my first novel, The Chemical Detective, was published in 2019. And there's 3 more in the series. Actually, there's lots more in the series, but there's 3 more written. And my most recent one is set in the week leading up to Christmas in Brazil, and that's called The Chemical Cocktail. And as I mentioned, I've also written a book about my very first job as an engineer, which is published by Sandstone Press, which is called Phosphate Rocks. And it's the story of a body found in a fertilizer factory in Leith, which is in the process of being demolished.
And that was your first job as an engineer?
Yeah, after I graduated from university, I thought I knew lots, and then I went to work in a fertilizer factory and found out I knew absolutely nothing at all, and that I might have some technical know-how, but how people use technology is often not quite what you expect.
So, what got you into sort of being an engineer? Tell us a little bit about that before we get into the book.
Yeah, sure. Well, I really enjoyed. I mean, I was very lucky because I grew up in Scotland, and I went to Scottish Comprehensive, James Gillespie's High School. And in Scotland, you don't specialise as early as in England, so I was able to do languages as well as science in my last 2 years. So I didn't really have to choose between arts and science, which I've always thought is a completely false choice, because all of us, have sides to our personality which are, more on the arts side, and side to our personality which are more on the science. And actually, I think all human beings should know about both, and we should all read, and we should all have a basic grasp of how the world works around us. But chemistry was my sort of first love. I wasn't very good at chemistry itself because I'm really clumsy, as you can tell from the skiing accident. So I kept breaking all the glassware. So chemical engineering, you do your chemistry in steel and iron, not in glass. So it suited me a bit better. So I did 2 years of natural sciences and then 2 years of engineering, and came out with a degree in chemical engineering. And then had to look for a job. And as I say, so I graduated in 1982. So there was it was still quite tough. There weren't very many women in engineering, but ICI had opened up a special scheme to try and encourage more women into engineering. And I got a pity job through that back into Edinburgh, but it was fantastic. It was I learnt such a lot. It was a proper training scheme where they took someone who thought they were quite clever and then knocked it all out of them, and then taught them how things really worked. So I really enjoyed it. I met some fantastic people, and people who could fix things with absolutely nothing, but just massive experience.
There's still not a mad amount of women in engineering and science.
No, I'm not. No, and I can never quite work out why. I mean, it's interesting. I think Britain is probably worse than others, which makes me think that it's partly the A-level system, which makes you specialise so early. I mean, I worked in Portugal. I've worked all over the world, but I lived in Portugal for 9 years, and it was much more evenly balanced, the gender balanced, and they did a more of a French sort of baccalaureate education system, so you didn't have to drop, history or languages or English or the equivalent so early. So, I mean, that's one. I heard Jim Al-Khalili, who does the Life Scientific, I heard him talk about this once, and he was saying that in, Middle Eastern countries, it isn't at all the same gender divide in physics. So I think we just force people to choose at age 15, when I think at that age, girls traditionally are better at the subjects which require verbal skills, and tend to gravitate towards other subjects. I mean, lots of people I know who could perfectly well have done science, just chose to do history or English or art subjects. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but we ought to be able to do both and then make up our minds later.
Very true.
That's my
So
theory, and I'm sticking to it.
you've travelled all over the world. There's some
Mm.
of the inspirations from what I was reading
Yeah.
when I sort of investigated your books for like the places that you've set them. So like you've been to Brazil and
Yes, I have. And you know what happened I was looking at some graphs the other day which show how Britain's reduced its carbon footprint and how much less carbon we emit than we did 40 years ago. But unfortunately, we've exported a lot of our industries. So steel is now mined in Brazil, and the iron is mined in Brazil and then shipped to China, where it's turned into steel and then shipped back for us to build our wind turbines and bridges and railway lines. So most of, as I was entering industry in the 1980s, in British industry was dying. So a lot of my work ended up being in Brazil, Russia, India, China. The BRIC countries were the ones with the really burgeoning economies and growing populations, and lots of people who'd been in poverty for a long time, who quite rightly wanted the washing machines and cars and all the things that we took for granted. So I ended up doing quite a lot of work in China, in Brazil, and in India, less in Russia.
so what gave you the inspiration apart from the skiing accident and your children? What what inspired Jack? Because I feel like there's a little bit of you in.
Well, yeah, obviously, she's really sporty. No, which I'm not. Yeah, I think it was two things. I think number one was revenge. I had a job go badly wrong. I got my dream job and my dream boss and my dream travel, and then the management at the top changed, and I suddenly found myself in a job where my face just didn't fit. And it was really painful because I was trying to put it right. I was really, I've always sort of been able to overcome things and find a different way of working, and change myself where necessary to change my approach. But I just couldn't make any headway. I wasn't getting anywhere. So in the end, we agreed to part, and I got a period of paid garden leave, which is brilliant if you want to write. But even more brilliant is being really angry. So I kind of decided then to start populating, taking the character of my replacement boss, and just seeing how many interesting ways I could torture him, which I thoroughly recommend in print, not in real life. So it was that. And the second thing, I think, was when I'd been working in India, I had visited Bhopal, the site of the world's worst chemical accident, which is, we're coming up actually to 40 years. So it was 1984. And I remember it as a young graduate working in the Leith fertilizer factory. I remember when the accident happening, and people finding it very difficult to believe just how catastrophic it was. Basically, a cloud of toxic gas was released in the middle of the night, accidentally, in a factory that was shutting down, and people basically had no chance to escape. It was a very still night, and the gas settled, and they know that 5,000 people died, but the numbers are probably much greater than that, and they know 500,000 people were injured, some of them with really life-changing injuries to their lungs. So an absolute catastrophe. But what I hadn't realised, I went to visit while I was working in India, is that the factory still hasn't been remediated. It's still sitting there rusting. And because they're just the only people who've ever benefited are the lawyers, still fighting over compensation, but the people who should have been compensated got a paltry amount. And it made me so angry. I'd always had a very charmed life in the chemical industry, and I'd always done really interesting jobs, and it'd always been about making things better, clean water, clean air, catalysts for renewables, so that it was a real shock to sort of see the dirty underbelly, as it were, of an accident that had happened, where the people affected really should have been properly compensated and looked after, and weren't. And because it was so far out of anybody's sight and everyone's forgotten about it. So I think that sort of inspired me. I wanted to put pen to paper because I wanted to be able to explore, I guess, I think what it comes down to is what I'm interested in is white collar crime. I'm interested in where people who should know better, who have the education, who have the wealth, who have all the benefits, do bad things, and they very often don't go to prison because they're very good at sort of wiggling around the law. So I think with Jack Silver, my heroine, I wanted her to be a fighter for justice, but not with guns, but using her brain rather than her muscles or arms.
Yeah, I think we need more Jacks. We've just been filming our top 10 of the year lists, and
Yeah.
my book two, I've got 2 book twos. I cheated. But one of them is making me so angry as I read it, because it is about the people who owned Purdue Pharma. The
Yes.
something thing, and they had a chemical plant that exploded and just wiggled away
Yeah.
from it. And it's just like, my husband was like, I don't know if you should read that in public, because I just keep muttering angrily at
I
it.
know. Yeah, it is very difficult to believe some of these things, and to believe that decisions made go unpunished, and yet somebody who makes an honest mistake may find themselves in prison if they come from the wrong side of the tracks. Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Will you be at Crime Central tomorrow?
Alas, I won't, unfortunately, because of work and because of the train strike. I'm not going to make it, but the wonderful Northern Crime Syndicate will be there, and I'll be with them in spirit. And I think actually the wonderful Sarah Moorhead is going to take my place, the writer of Witness X and other books. And she's much, much funnier than me, so it should be brilliant.
I don't think that's true. Although Sarah Moorhead is a fabulous person.
She is a force of nature. And of course, Judith O'Reilly and Rob Parker, Robert Scragg, Adam Peacock, and Trevor Wood.
I know there's a massive collection of really awesome, talented people in the NCS.
Oh, and they're such a lovely bunch as well. I mean, it's kept us all sane through lockdown. Being able to chat to each other and do silly things like whose crime is it anyway. But they've been incredibly supportive, and actually Judith, who's just written the most fantastic book, Sleep When You're Dead. I don't know if you've read it yet, Caroline.
I have, because I interviewed Judah about
it's an absolute cracker, and her opening chapter is just so whoa, in your face. Anyway, so I asked her to give me some help with the book 4 in the Jack Silver series, and she's read it and given me some pointers. Saying I was just so impressed with what she did.
One of the things I asked her about is why we didn't think why there aren't sort of more women kind of thriller writers and women lead characters in thrillers.
It is really interesting, and I think we need to ask some publishers, because when so the Chemical Detective, my agent is Juliet Mushens, and when we went out to submission, we got a lot of publishers coming back saying we love it, but we don't know how to sell it. And so I'm not sure what that means in practice. I don't know whether it's readers really want a kind of tall, dark, handsome man to kind of lead them through adventure, rather than a really exciting, bright, gutsy woman. I don't know whether it's the demand that's there, or whether publishers just haven't figured out how to market it. So I don't know. And Judith has got fantastic female character in Fang. And although she's not the main character, I mean Michael North is, she's still every bit as important in terms of the plot, as is her granny.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it is. I think we're still uncomfortable with women using physical violence in books. I'm not sure. I mean, there are exceptions, like my sister, the serial killer, which I really enjoyed. It just made me giggle all the way through. But I don't know if it's kind of okay to have men beating each other up, but we don't want women in books employing violence, which is, part of the reason why Jack, she's not really a physical fighter. She's more of a, use her head to figure out how to defeat the baddies rather than beat them up.
But then that makes sense for Jack as well, doesn't it? Because of who she is. She would fight back with her brains more than brawn.
Yeah. And I'm 5'4", so I'm never going to be a great. I don't know. I'm sure there are plenty of good boxers who are 5'4", but not me.
So so you got the Chemical Cocktails book 3. How many books are you planning with featuring Jack?
Well, there are 4 written. So the last one is called The Chemical Code, and that's also set in Brazil, and that kind of finishes off a sort of storyline that's been running right through from the beginning. I've got 3, I would say, others that are in kind of various states of planning or writing, but I'm probably going to give it a break, just see how this next one does. I've got some other ideas that I'd like to do. I might try a little bit of speculative fiction as well. So yeah, I really enjoy writing. It's the most wonderful escape from the day job. So I only do it for my entertainment. I'm absolutely delighted that other people want to buy it, but even if you didn't, I would still be writing, because it's just a wonderful way of figuring out what I'm trying to understand.
Oh, I love that. I love speculative fiction. So let me know when you.
Who would you recommend then that I have a look at?
So,
Who've you enjoyed recently?
You've already name dropped Sarah Moorhead, who is
Oh yeah, isn't she great? Yeah.
Favorite authors altogether. Apart from that, I'm a big fan of like Andy Weir, but
right, I haven't tried that.
Really speculative. He's more like proper sci-fi.
Okay. Oh, I'll give that a go then. Excellent.
Haven't looked into that much, just speculative fiction. I'm really loving Adrian Tchaikovsky's series.
Oh, isn't he wonderful? Yes, I completely agree there. And what about Cixin Liu? I mean, I suppose he's more hard science fiction, but I was incredibly, I've just been transported by his weird and wonderful worlds.
Yeah.
So I want to write about something which is probably too difficult to write. I'll probably be libeled if I write about it. So if I set it in a kind of near future on a different planet, then I might be able to say what I want to say.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, no, I love that. You're on a win with all of those authors. Sam has asked, has the Chemical series got easier to write with each book? She's also said that you're taller than her, but that is not.
I'm 5'3.5", really. I say 5'4".
You're still taller than Sam.
Okay. Yes and no. So when we were at Newcastle Noir at the weekend, we were talking to somebody whose name's immediately escaped me, who described writing her book as like vomiting, in that it was something that she'd been working up to write, and it was a memoir. And when she finally unlocked the way of writing it, it just poured out of her. So my first book really just kind of poured out. And then I spent 9 years editing it. So there is I've definitely got slower, but I probably don't need to do as many rewrites as I did at the beginning. So it's got easier in that I've got a bit more confidence in that I'm sort of a little bit more disciplined about where I go. I don't wander off. I mean, my editor might disagree because she still has to rein me in when I have yet another thread woven in. She's, no, you've got to take this out. It's too much. So in that sense, I think the writing process is easier. But I really like a good plot, so that can get more difficult because I've got to just go back and check, because I've left lots of little snippets in the early books which I can pull the threads of later, and so there is sometimes some going back and checking rather than just running off with where the characters want to take me, which is the fun bit of writing. So
Do
I
you,
think it's both easier and harder.
do you keep a note of all those little snippets, or do you actually have to go back into the books to find them?
I have an Excel spreadsheet with everything, but I do sometimes have to go back into the books. Yeah. Yeah.
So is there an overarching thread that we're gonna get solved as we go through the series?
Oh, I'm just going to give
I'm
you
not
lots of new hooks are going to come in. Yeah.
I'm going back through the first one trying to think if I could think of anything that was
Yeah, I mean, there's a naughty element because I've always loved James Bond, but I was always fed up with the disposable women, and you're very, very beautiful. There's at least one that he wakes up with at the start of the book, one beautiful woman who James Bond wakes up with, and then one in the middle who's probably a baddie and may meet a horrible sticky end, and then he goes to bed with one at the end. So I was fairly determined to have some disposable beautiful men in my books, and so that's been quite a lot of fun writing.
I'm just sorry.
I'm not sure if that was disapproval or
No, I didn't know where to go with that. I was like,
so that's always fun to write. I was just a bit sick of sex always being associated with violence in crime, and I wanted there to be some kind of fun raunchy stuff where it was a woman had agency rather than being a a sidekick or a victim. So
yeah, as Sam says, absolute approval. I love it. It's just such a good, such a good way. And there is a ski instructor in the first one, isn't there?
oh yes,
Sort of
oh
right
yes.
in
Who doesn't love a ski instructor? I have to say, I am extremely happily married to a man that I've known for over 40 years. So this is just my vicarious escapes.
Yeah, well, Vicarious Escapes are also fine, happily married or not, aren't they? Sam said Jacqueline Silver is an excellent name. Did it come easily, or were there other names in the running?
It came easily. She came sort of fully formed. I think I wanted a female name that could be confused with a male name because she's Dr. Silver, so it's very often assumed she's a man. And Silva came because she has a Portuguese background, so she's de Silva, and a lot of the people who came to a lot of the people who came to Portugal in the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries were escaping persecution, and they took the names of trees. So de Silva, and so when she comes to England, she changes her name to Silva. Yeah, so she came pretty early. I think I went through a Jack Reacher phase as well, so I quite like the fact that she could have a first a Lee Child first name. Yeah, so most of the other names tend to change. So particularly the disposable boys, I will give them a name. Usually a Strictly Come Dancing star. A Strictly Come Dancing pro early on, and then I may change their name later on. Sometimes, because if you have too many names that begin with the same letter, it's confusing for the reader, so sometimes I have to go back and change the names. But no, Jack and Frank Good, the baddie, well, he's the sort of legal baddie, if you like. He's the one who escapes justice, escapes being punished most of the time. I wanted him, his name was just amused me because he's neither Frank nor good, so So those two names came fairly early on, and the rest sometimes I'll put a name in as well. I never sit down and agonize over what name to use. It's just the first one that comes into my head, and then later on I'll go back and do a search and replace.
So does Frank pop back up in the other books?
Oh yes.
See, you sold me on your book at Harrogate.
Aha. Okay.
You were telling me about like the plot and things, and the next step I went after we finished talking was back to the bookstore to buy.
Oh, thank you. That's nice. Good. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it inspires you to read the other ones. They do get better, I promise.
The first one was excellent, and I will go back and read the other ones, maybe over Christmas when we're not reading for the author chats, because we do tend to get a bit like sidetracked.
Yeah, I know. How many books do you read, Caroline? A year?
About 250
Wow.
generally, between
Okay.
250 and 300
Yeah.
on average.
So almost one a day.
No, if I hit one a day, I'm doing really well. That's
Okay.
kind of locked down. But yeah, fairly.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
It's really not. I have a penchant for graphic novels as well.
Oh, how lovely.
But
Fantastic.
I think that
Yeah.
artificially inflates my numbers a little bit more.
Yeah, but they still require quite a lot for, they still, I mean, you read them probably at the same pace as a novel, don't you? I suppose there's fewer pages. Yeah.
Hence one of my favourite author chat questions of would you make a graphic novel of your book?
Well, I know exactly who'd do it. It's a man called Ramin Abrahami who wrote the most fantastic cartoon, and I will send you the link after this because it's available now to download for free, which is about Flixborough, and it's the story of the Flixborough disaster in 1974. You get that I'm a bit obsessed by chemical disasters. And he's turned that into the most fantastic cartoon. So yeah, he'd definitely do my graphic novel, or else the person who did who wrote Berlin, or who illustrated Berlin, that huge. That was a fantastic one. Sorry, I'll remember the name in a minute, but that was a fantastic graphic novel as well. Yeah, I'd be very keen if you know anyone who'd like to do it. Yeah.
There's a really good graphic novel publishers called Self-Made Hero that are quite.
Say that again.
There's a really good graphic novel publishers called Self-Made Hero that
Okay, South Mid Hero.
do a lot of adaptations of books and
Okay.
things that are quite
Yeah.
interesting.
So, do you think the Chemical Detective could make a graphic novel? Do you think it could be a
Yeah, absolutely. Full of
good?
action and
Oh, I like that.
interesting.
Yeah, I like the idea, definitely. And then I get to see my ski instructor in cartoon form.
Exactly. I mean, who wouldn't want that?
Absolutely.
Sam has asked if you've got any good pictures of your books in various places from readers, like holiday pics.
I
Apparently, they didn't also tell us they had a pic of their book with a stormtrooper.
I don't actually. It would be lovely if people would send them. I did take a few. I've taken a few pictures of them on various beaches, and when I've been in China. So I was still working in China when my second book came out, The Chemical Reaction. So no, I think I ought to actually. I think that would be. I think that's going to be an aim to try and. The lovely Carolyn Kirby, who wrote When We Fall, which is the most fantastic book about a female pilot in the Second World War and in the Polish Air Force and the Katyn massacre. She managed to take some pictures of the chemical cocktail on a beach, which I was really pleased about, and kite surfing or windsurfing. So yeah, I've had some nice writer friends. But no, we've got to get we've got to get the Jack Silver series into airports so people can pick them up on their way on holiday, and then they can send me good pictures. So.
Or just randomly at places where there's stormtroopers.
Yeah. Or the odd ski instructor. I wouldn't be adverse to them holding up a book. That'd be fine.
Can't promise you ski instructors, but do go to places where there's stormtroopers.
Okay, brilliant.
Might be able to do that.
Are those conventions? Are those
Yeah, I go with my husband quite a lot. In
Yeah.
fact, my favourite picture, one of my favourite pictures I have of him, because he's ridiculously tall, is a picture of him with someone dressed as Chewbacca and he's taller.
That sounds brilliant.
Sarah's asked how you keep track of your characters.
Well, they kind of live in my head, so they're quite easy to find. Um, I Yeah, I've generally got a pretty good idea. I mean, I do. I literally do keep a spreadsheet of lots of bits of plot. Less so in the later books, but in the earlier ones where I did lots and lots of different rewrites, it was quite important to keep track of where they're going. But generally, yeah, generally I don't have too much trouble because then they're never very far away when I need to ask them something.
And how much, so I know the science will be accurate, obviously, but how much of it is based on kind of real things? So there's like a lot about.
Yeah, there's a mix, I guess. I mean, I knew in each of the books, my sort of end point was around a disaster of some sort. So in the Chemical Detective, it ends up in Chernobyl. In the Chemical Reaction, it's about the Banchao Dam disaster, which was a structural collapse in the 1970s, the biggest man-made disaster outside of in peacetime. In the Chemical Cocktail, there's a lot of it, well, particularly in the Chemical Code, I go into quite a lot about mine disasters and tailing dam collapses in Brazil. It's making it sound like great fun, aren't I? Those are the kind of themes, I guess, that I was exploring because it was what interested me, and I was trying to work some things out myself. But I'm always really interested in, kind of both chemistry and physics, how you kind of make it interesting to people. So I try my very best, whether someone's jumping off a cliff and calculating, what their terminal velocity will be as they before they hit the water, or whether you're talking about acceleration in a maglev train. The way my brain works is I'm always kind of figuring out how to make sense of it. Just the magic of flying, isn't it amazing? Every time everyone understands. Well, we'll understand the fundamentals, the Bernoulli equation, and the fact that you've got air moving faster over the top of the wing than the bottom, and that 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 provides the lift that raises the aeroplane into the air. But it still feels like magic when you're doing it. So when I'm experiencing things like that, my brain is always ticking over how it works, and so I like getting that into the books. In the Chemical Cocktail, there's a bit of invented nonsense. So whenever I was traveling, one of my biggest issues was shoes, because I could never find safety boots my size in the factories that I was visiting. So I also had to take a pair of fairly big steel toe capped boots. And then when I'm in a new city, I like to be able to walk around, so I need some kind of comfortable walking shoes. And then, if there's a chance of sort of going out for an evening, you might want sort of more fancy shoes. So you end up just filling a carry-on with shoes. So in the Chemical Cocktail, I've developed a flat pack which has all the bits of shoes that you then assemble and plug into electric current, and it makes them go. Molds them to your foot, and makes them the perfect shoe of any size of heel, any sort of sole, any point of toe. And then you can color them too, using the same physics that bird feathers use to change color in different lights. So I had a lot of fun inventing my magic shoe roll. And then in the Chemical Detective, I've got a magic handbag, which can be a backpack or a suitcase or a snowboard carrier, and has everything inside it that you might ever need. So it's a kind of the Swiss Army pin knife of handbags. So yeah, so I like having a little bit of fun with the technology. So some of it's real, and some of it's aspirational.
If only they existed.
I
I think
know,
Lindsay
I know.
was
I'm hoping
saying,
someone will take me up on my shoe roll at some point.
yeah, I think Lindsay was saying she wants the shoe kit. Sam asked if you've got a favourite location that you've used in the series so far.
Well, actually, my favourite locations for writing about are probably the places I like least to go to. So I've spent a lot of time in China, and much as I love my Chinese colleagues, I found it a very, very difficult place to work. I was very well looked after. I mean, I can't complain, but I've always been quite good at languages and European languages. I can usually kind of get by in, but in China it was just like it was like someone had put kryptonite to my language powers, and I could not. I really did make some effort to learn some Chinese, but every trip I went, I would have forgotten what I'd learnt on the last trip. So I really enjoyed writing about China, but it was partly because, again, I was so uncomfortable in China. I was kind of exploring that. And I think in all the books, I start off as a very pampered kind of business traveler, who goes to nice hotels and gets nice flights and gets driven around everywhere. And then by the end of the book, I'm trying to do things by myself, and realizing that how little as a business traveler you see of the real country that you visit. And once you're on your own and you're trying to make your own way around, usually chased by baddies, it just becomes a lot tougher. So yeah, so favorite places. I absolutely loved visiting Chernobyl because it was have you been, Carolyn? No, it's one of the, I mean, obviously I wouldn't recommend it now, but pre the Russian invasion, it was a really fascinating place to go, both because of the trying to understand what happened, but also because it's been left alone, and it's interesting to see what nature does to a town if you stop if you stop trying to tame it. And some of it is not beautiful, actually. When you allowed weeds to choke other plants, you don't get a glorious forest. You get a kind of tangled, scrubby, um, you know, um, slightly strange landscape. But seeing the kind of the gradual crumbling of these really very, these were model towns. Pripyat, which was the workers' dormitory for Chernobyl, um, was built as a kind of, for the brightest and the best, and it was all mod cons in the 1970s. But it's so bleak, it's so unremittingly kind of concrete, and wide boulevards and kind of flats, and everything's very organized. The people in one area can only shop in one supermarket, can only go to one sports center, and so on. So it's rather lovely seeing it being taken over by a sort of vegetation that kind of softens the edges and sort of makes you realize how puny we are as human beings and how powerful the world is around us. So I really enjoyed that visit. Tragic though it was. Brazil is unbelievably beautiful, and I've had a lot of fun doing research in Brazil, obviously checking out the beaches. But again, it's one of those countries that on the surface it looks fabulous, but you don't have to go very far into the interior to realize that the disparity between rich and poor is absolutely shocking. I suppose India has probably been my favorite place to travel and work. I really loved the colleagues I worked with because they were so inventive and exuberant, and it's very dangerous to say this because, of course, as a tourist, you don't ever get the full picture, even as a business tourist. But there just seemed to be a lot of joy and colour and friendliness, and people who didn't have very easy lives still seem to find a great deal of meaning in things. I suppose it's a very spiritual country. And going to places like the Taj Mahal was absolutely magical. I was it's really amazing to travel around in India. And I did it by myself, which is great as well, because you get talking to people, and I tended to gravitate towards families with children, so I made lots of new friends, and I had a great time.
Sounds like it. I'm just scroll. I don't want to miss any questions, but loads have drifted in, and I'm conscious I don't want to miss them. So Donna asked if you've given any of your characters a quirk or characteristic that you've come to regret.
Oh golly, no, that's a great one, Donna. So as you know, Donna, I'm quite keen on firemen, and in my second book, I've got a troupe of male strippers who Jack. She doesn't trust at first, but they end up helping her in one of her missions. And I probably went a little bit overboard there because I was having quite a lot of fun writing that. Characteristics that I regret. I don't think so. They'll probably come back to bite me at some point. I regret having to kill as many beautiful young men as I have to, but we all have to suffer for our art. So,
Lindsay wants to know if we're going to get more of the family history aspect continuing from the last book.
Yes, you definitely are. Yes, whether you'll find everything out or not, I'm not sure. There may be more to come, but yes, you will definitely find out more. There will be some resolution there.
Sarah apparently has learnt Mandarin at the first level.
Fantastic, Sarah! You are very clever. I'm very impressed. I managed ni hao, hello, and xie. Thank you. You can tell me if that's right or not, Sarah. But that's about as far as I got. So I'm incredibly impressed.
And she wants to know if there's somewhere you'd set a book in the future.
Oh yes. Well, I've still got my book to write, and whether that is there's definitely a Jack visiting India book. I went on one of the things that my children are my sons are 7 years apart, so we always used to do activity holidays because when you've got a big age gap, finding things that they both like doing, it tended to be around water. So we did a fantastic visit to Slovenia, which I've kind of written about in the Chemical Detective. But we also had a wonderful holiday in Turkey, and we've also been swimming in Montenegro. So I'm quite keen. We swam into the submarine tunnels, which were used by the Yugoslav Navy in the war to hide their submarines. So I think there's definitely a Jack adventure to be set in Montenegro.
Lovely. Sam says she thinks Sarah's just volunteered herself as a translator in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I would appreciate that. And it's interesting that translation in China is as much, and probably this is in every country, it's as much cultural as the actual language, because quite often I would ask a question at a meeting in China, and there would be a furious argument that would go on for 20 minutes. And at the end, they would say, yes. Or, they'd give me a one-word answer. So I realized that the translator probably misses out a whole lot of stuff that they don't want the stupid foreigner to hear. So you'll have your work cut out for you, Sarah.
Yeah, she said, oh dear. Sam says she asked why firemen.
Oh, sorry. It's when we were at Newcastle Noir, we did a Whose Crime Is It Anyway on Sunday night, and our character Babs was I think being picked upon by the boys. So it's an improv where you try and write a best-selling crime novel in an hour with the audience's help. So I decided that Babs needed some joy in her life, and my solution was a burly fireman to rescue her. And then I got teased about loving firemen, so that was the reason. But firemen are amazing, let's face it. and female firefighters as well. What do you call them? Do you call them fire women, or is it just firefighters? I suppose would be a better term, whether they're male or female.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we'll have to call them firefighters, and then
Hmm.
should be gender blind.
I think this may be Patsy is asking if you've got any more books to set around Edinburgh.
Yes. So I really enjoyed writing Phosphate Rocks. It was my husband who persuaded me to write it, because when I we lived together when I did during my first job, and I used to come back after night shift and tell him the stories of what had happened, and he really encouraged me to write it down. And I found it much. It was amazing how much I remembered when I actually got started, and it's a great writing exercise just to sort of say I remember and see what pours out. So yeah, I think I will. I think I've got another couple of. I don't know. I'll do it for myself. I'll sort of write my memoirs, as it were, and then just see what comes out, because I think I probably need to find some themes that are going to carry right through. But I will definitely write some more about work I've done, kind of narrow, thinly disguised, and I would love to write more in Edinburgh and in Scotland. I mean, it's where I come from. It's where I hope to end up. Most of my work has been south, unfortunately, but yeah, writing. I mean, there's so many good writers. I was reading Doug Johnson's Black Hearts the other day about the Skelfs. That's a series I love, about the funeral directors. And you've got people like Emma Christie writing glorious thrillers set in Scotland. So it's a pretty, and obviously the Ian Rankins and others. So it feels to me like Scotland's already got it's really stuffed with brilliant writers. But yeah, it'd be nice to set a book in Scotland, definitely.
Lindsay's saying, do you think women in this industry are finding it easier now?
In the publishing industry or in the manufacturing industry?
She's just saying this industry, so I don't know which one she means. Maybe she'll set
Okay.
this straight. I mean, she says she means chemical engineering.
Yes. Okay. It's a good question. I really don't know, because I came at a kind of, if you like, a golden age where it had been decided that the gender imbalance was too imbalanced. Sorry, you can tell I'm a writer, can't you? I can't even get my words out. So there was a lot of positive discrimination. So I both benefited from positive discrimination and suffered from it when it came to my first promotions. So I got my job because I was female, because they wanted to redress the balance a bit. But then I was passed over for the first couple of promotions because they didn't think I would want to work shifts. So when I put them right, I was able to move on. And I mean, what I see is, which is kind of depressing, is that you get a lot of people, graduates, you get a lot of people at the beginning of their careers, but somehow, as women, we disappear towards the end of our careers. And I've never fully understood that, but then I've had a very supportive family. So I've been able to work right through. I suspect there's an element that, and I've certainly found this, that the higher up you get in an organization, the more ruthless you have to be. And some of that is right. Some of it is just the nature of the job. You have to make tougher decisions, and it's not everyone's cup of tea. Is some of it unconscious bias? I suspect it's just that everybody needs to find a culture in which they're comfortable, and which their values are, meet the values of those people that they're working with. And actually, it's not about how nice the product is. So, you can work in a company that's doing wonderful things and have absolutely repulsive colleagues. or you can be working somewhere that's making, I don't know, plastic for fizzy drinks bottles, and have the loveliest team that you could wish for and the nicest bosses. So I think just finding places where you're happy and valued is probably the most important thing. Do I want to rule the world? Do I want to be the boss of a multi-million, global chemical corporation? Probably not. What I enjoy are the technical problem-solving challenges. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm conflicted as to whether it's because women are passed over for the senior jobs, or whether people get to the senior jobs and think, nah, not for me. Thank you very much. I don't know. Just was it Barbara who asked the question?
It was Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Um,
Does Lindsay have an answer?
we'll see. She might comment.
Yeah.
I think it's good that there is literature though with people like Jack in the even through literature. Sometimes it's good to see women doing those kind of jobs, isn't it? And you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
imagine yourself doing them.
Yeah, and let's face it, they're very well paid. So she gets to be a maverick. She gets to she can always find a job in the country that she's interested in. I've always been able to move to more or less whatever part of the world or country that I wanted to work in. So yeah, it gives you a lot of freedom, a lot of control, and so I guess it's about figuring out. For me at least, it's been figuring out what I wanted to do at different stages in my life. When my kids were small, I didn't particularly want to be traveling all the time. As they got older, I was kind of more relaxed about it. So
Cool. One of my other questions I've been asking everybody
mm-hmm.
recently, because we've been doing our top 10 of the year, is what have been your reads of the year so far?
Oh golly, it's so hard to do that because I've read some fantastic books this year, but the ones, my favourites are always the ones I'm reading right now, because those are the ones I'm immersed in. So I have recently got a copy of Trevor Wood's You Can Run, which is fabulous, and I think it comes out early next year. And if you know Trevor Wood from The Man on the Street and his series set in with a what does he call him, Sherlock Holmes, a homeless man who uncovers a crime and turns detective. But this is a bit of a departure in that it's set in a Northumberland village, and it's about a 15-year-old who suddenly finds herself in hot water. That's really, really good. I think I mentioned before, I absolutely love Judith O'Reilly's novel, Sleep When You're Dead. I just thought that was such a cracking, exciting roller coaster of a novel. It was just all action. I really enjoyed that. This is the first of Louise Beach's that I've read, a Renda writer, and I've heard great things about her. I went to a workshop of hers at Newcastle Noir with her and Michael Malone. Where is he? Michael Malone as well, another Renda writer, a real poet. So I'm enjoying those, but I've only dipped into them because I just got them at the weekend. I really enjoyed Bonnie Garmer's Lessons in Chemistry. I thought that was a cracking read. And I loved William Shaw's Dead Rich. Again, I think he's a fantastic writer. He can do no wrong, but this was a real departure, much more of a thriller. I really enjoyed that. I'm reading Helen Kist as well, What I Hid From You, which is kind of interesting. A dentist with a Valium addiction. A really interesting book. And On the Edge by Jane Jesmond. She's a fantastic writer, and she writes about a female free climber in Cornwall who kind of wakes up on the edge of a lighthouse and has to try and figure out how she got there. And you did ask. A huge favourite of mine. This is, if you like speculative fiction, I thoroughly recommend, is Dr. Lorraine Wilson. and this is her second book. The first one was This Is Our Undoing, but The Way the Light Bends, it's a story of grief, and she can do no wrong. I mean, she could take the phone directory and turn it into poetry. She's absolutely brilliant. And then lastly, a little bit of spy fiction. Sarah Armstrong, The Starlings of Bucharest. It's better than Le Carre. She's one of those really fantastic poetic writers. And it's the story of a young man who's kind of tricked into going to across into the Iron Curtain. And it's all about manipulation and spying. And I thought it was an absolutely fantastic book. So those are kind of the ones that come to hand. But I am a voracious reader. I've probably missed out some real crackers that I read as well.
Are you reading all of those at the same time?
No. Those are mostly ones I've read. It's only the ones I picked up at Newcastle Noir where I've dipped into the kind of first chapter of the books that I bought there. But no, I tend to have an audiobook on the go. I've really enjoyed David Bishop's Cesar Aldo novels on audio. They're great. And I usually have something on. I'm usually reading some nonfiction at the same time. I just dip in and out.
Do you like scientific nonfiction, or do you find that hard to?
Yeah,
I find it difficult to dip into.
it is.
Yeah. Sometimes because your knowledge level is higher than it's written sort of for at times.
Yes, I do enjoy it. I mean, my all-time favorite book, I've probably mentioned before, is The Periodic Table by Primo Levi. And I think it's the most magical. For me, it's just somebody describing the life of an industrial chemist in such beautiful words. I just found it I suppose it's what inspired me to try and write, is that it was the first book I've read where I saw me in it, because the work that he was doing was what interested me. I mean, he's obviously written very movingly about his incarceration in Auschwitz, and those are amazing books. But the one that just really grabbed me by the throat was the story of his work as a chemist. So yeah, I do. I quite like reading biographies as well. There's a fantastic prize called the Barbellion Prize, which is founded by Jake Goldsmith, who has some severe. I'm sorry, I can't remember if it's muscular dystrophy, but he set up a prize for disabled writers or writers living with chronic illness. And so I recently read the first winner of that, which is called Golem Girl by Riva Lera. And it's the story of a woman with spina bifida who's determined to become an artist and, survives brilliantly. And the other book, which I've ordered but I haven't got yet, is about a deaf family, and really interesting to read about. Very different experiences, and when I think really can be really illuminating when you read somebody who can take you into their world. So yeah, I've but when I was traveling a lot, it was much easier to read because I had long periods on planes and trains where.
We have a minute left. So
it's flown by.
I know. Remind everybody of what they're going to go and buy.
Oh yes, I'm so sorry. Well, I thoroughly recommend you check out The Chemical Cocktail. You don't have to read these books in order. This is number 3, but it doesn't really matter because there's lots of flashbacks, and actually it's quite a lot about Jack's earlier life. And it's set in the week coming up to Christmas, and she's on the beach with a rather handsome surfer, and he is kidnapped, and she's got a week to get the ransom together to release him. But as she goes backwards and forwards to Britain to try and get the things that the kidnappers are after, more and more is revealed about who he is and what his relationship is to her. So that's the one I recommend for a perfect Christmas present. And if you do read it and enjoy it, let me know.
Excellent. And then thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's been really nice.
Oh, and Sam says you're on her reading list for over Christmas.
Thank you, Sam. That's very kind of you.
They go, we're offline.